This is the TJ Hoisington Podcast. Unleash your greatness within.
So I just said, if I don't speak up and warn them now, I don't want to be 75 and thinking, oh, I could have said something. I could have, written a book. I could have warned people. Like I was the product of whatever this is. So at least my conscience is clear. I know where I came from. I know what it feels like. And like I said earlier, it's going to rain, and I feel it in the bones, and we got to be prepared for it.
Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. In today's episode, it was my privilege to interview my good friend and author, Fabian Bello.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. Greatnesswithin.com. TJ Hoisington. Greatnesswithin.com. Oh, if you dreaming it, believe in it, work hard for it, and in the process serve others in a positive way. Think you can do it.
You see, Fabian, and I'm going to be really brief here, but Fabian, what an amazing story. Fabian is the author of the new book titled reMade in America. And it starts with his parents who left Cuba when he was just 2 years old and got out of Cuba when Fidel Castro took over the country and it changed from capitalism to socialism or communism. I'm telling you what, he has an amazing story. And you know what? He has every excuse not to succeed in this country, the United States of America, but his parents taught him a better way of looking at the world, believing in freedom, and holding true to some of those core principles is why Fabian wrote the book. But Fabian actually went on to become, and today he's the president of an aviation company, a fleet of private jets and so forth. And he has an amazing story. So listen, if you like this video, hey, I invite you to subscribe or at least leave a comment or something. I would really appreciate it. Now, without any further ado, you want to hear this amazing story. Let me welcome Fabian to the podcast.
Fabian, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thanks for having me, TJ.
No, it's awesome. So listen, I've got to let all the listeners know from the outset that you are one of my good friends, and we've become friends over the last several years. And you wanted to write a book and tell a little bit of your story, your background, because it was a needed message that needed to be out there. And so you approached our small little boutique publishing company, Aylesbury Publishing, to say, hey, could you help me publish this book? And so we've helped you publish the book through our publishing company. And now it's gone very well over the last several months. And so I just wanted to let people know from the outset that we know each other. We enjoy each other's company. We've had some business ventures together and so forth. So I think the best way to open this up is for you to share with the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how the book reMade in America came all about. So go wherever you want to go in terms of this whole thought and theme, brother.
Well, I guess we should start with the fact that I was born in Havana, Cuba. And I left when I was 2 years old, arriving in the States at 3. Pretty much grew up in the States, but the whole story revolves around my family's journey in escaping communism and coming to the land of opportunity. And myself being the example of what that looks like thanks to them.
Yeah, for sure. But go into that a little bit more. Your parents, tell a little bit about, because you've told me, and that's obviously in the book, reMade in America, but how did your parents, well, let's back up. Let's be real with the audience. Why did your parents want to leave Cuba when they did?
Way before I was born, my parents had me when they were 30 years old. Communism started for them when they were teenagers. So they were really robbed their entire childhood. That's just the reality of it. There was
Right.
no opportunity. Didn't matter if you went to school, didn't go to school. There was just nothing going to be there left for them. So my story really starts way before I was even a thought, right? My parents wind up getting married, and even then they did not want to have children because they didn't want to have a child born in communism. It's just that they started getting a little bit older, and my mom was like, should we have one?
Yeah.
And I came around, but the reality is they had no everything that we do in the States when we prep for school and we go to college and you get your first job and you have the excitement of the whole future's ahead of you. They lived through a period of there was going to be no future, there was absolutely no excitement, and everything they used to have is gone.
Including religion to some degree, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when Fidel first took over, there was no religion allowed. I mean, there was no praying to any god. The only god that mattered was the guy that took over. That has obviously softened up now after a couple of Pope visits in the last 3-4 decades. But at the beginning, it was absolutely zero religion.
So people
Zero
really kind
everything.
of had
You had to live, breathe communism exactly as they planned it. And it's very difficult for people that lived at an upper middle class lifestyle, and all of a sudden all that is robbed and really taken away from you. So you know what it was like to have all this freedom, to have all this opportunity, and then now you don't have it when you're in the prime years of your life.
Yeah, for real. Your dad, I'm just trying to, and if I go too deep too quick, let me know. But your dad at one point was gonna, him and a buddy, I think, were going to take a
Safe.
boat
Yeah.
and get off the island, but
Mhm.
then it didn't happen through circumstance, which was a good thing for the moment, right? So
It was
tell
a
us a
good
little bit
thing
of
for
that
me.
story.
It was a good thing for me, or I wouldn't be here. But yeah, him and his buddy, they were desperate and they just couldn't take it anymore, and they built a makeshift raft. I get into detail about it in the book, and they tried to escape, but a mile out or whatever it was, the boat that you build under a twin size bed wasn't really going to hold up, and it started taking in water, and it was a little bit of waves, and it started turning over, and they had to swim back. And you have to do it carefully to make sure guards and police don't catch you, and because if they caught you back then trying to escape, that was a problem as well.
Yeah.
So that's like that is the sign of the desperation. And since then, so many people have tried that journey. We see the ones that made it, but we really don't hear about all the ones that didn't, and a lot don't and didn't make it.
Which is really sad.
That could have been my father and his friend.
Mm-hmm. So then the circumstances came where they I guess legally were able to leave. So your parents get on the plane and your mom starts to have a little bit of a panic attack, I believe, right? Is that right?
Yes, it was a serious story at the time. We make fun of it in my family now.
Yeah.
But basically the stress of leaving, we were the last of the family to really leave. Everyone else was already in Miami. And as we're leaving, it was in an Iberia aircraft. And as we're taking off, we're in the air. I guess my mom, with the saying goodbye, the leaving, the unknown, the stress, the pressure, you're leaving without a dollar, her little 2-year-old son's in the back, and she passes out. And they have her over by the galley trying to stabilize her and whatever, and the captain comes out and tells my dad, listen, I think it's best that we turn around and seek some medical attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, it's funny now, it wasn't funny then. My dad explained to the captain, he goes, listen, we're refugees, we are leaving, this is extremely overwhelming, she's in great health, just having a little moment, please don't go back. And the captain understood, kept flying, and we made it to Madrid, Spain. But the joke in the family is if we would have gone back, I'm not sure we would have all gotten off with you.
No, your mom almost ruined the whole excursion.
Or she would have stayed. No, I
She
mean,
would-
we do joke about it now. But yeah, I mean, you can only imagine the tension so high
Oh.
in that moment. That
So
it
for visa purposes, you guys had to go to Spain, spend some time there, and from there you could go to the US. Is that how it worked?
correct. At the time, you were not allowed to migrate directly to the US. You had to go through a third country. And Spain had a program that as long as you promised that you were not going to stay and you were just transitionary, they would allow you to go through them.
Wow. I can only imagine what that would have been like. Because did your parents have a thriving business or jobs in Cuba, and then suddenly in a matter of months or years, everything changed when Fidel
Yeah.
came into power, right?
Yeah, my grandparents did.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom's dad owned several beauty salons, and my father's dad owned a poultry distributorship, wholesaler, well, all throughout Havana.
Wow. So now you're 3 years old. You're finally in Miami. You start going to school. There's a couple things in the book, reMade in America, that shaped you. And I think it's worth bringing out.
Okay.
You say, well, actually, give us a little bit of a picture of what your schooling, you set it up first. What did schooling look like for you? Obviously, reading, you point out in the book, like me, reading was never my forte. It was always difficult. And so I had to kind of find other ways to learn that didn't require me to just focus through reading. Tell me a little bit about your experiences coming to a new land where you didn't speak really good English.
Well, I arrived at 3. I was raised in a Spanish-speaking household, so there was no pre-K3 and pre-K4 back then like there is now. So basically, you just jump right into kindergarten at the age of 5.
Okay.
So that was the beginning of my schooling, right? So English was a factor, but I think I picked it up relatively quickly, and within a year, I was speaking English like all the other kids. But I did go to a predominantly lower, maybe middle class public school system, and I did my entire schooling in the same type of school systems. They were all public schools. I didn't go to private schools or anything like that.
Oh yeah, public basic school. So here's the
Public.
What's that?
Straight up public schools, but in Florida, so they were a little bit better.
Okay, got it. So there was a point. Now I'm totally going to be maybe a little bit off on this, but I remember when we were proofreading the book before we printed it and so forth, there was the story about the school and the orange fruit, and there was a translation issue. Tell the audience about that experience.
Yeah, so my elementary school was actually called Naranja Elementary. The first school I went to, because we lived in a mobile home park in Homestead, Florida. So I kindergarten and first grade, I did at Naranja Elementary. Then my father, through hard work and saving money, we wound up buying a brand new home in an up and coming middle class community or city called Hialeah at the time. And I went to an elementary school there called Meadow Lane Elementary. And I remember in second grade, our teacher asked us to stand up, say who you were, and if you came from another school, what school you came from. And my mom would always say Naranja Elementary. So I stood up and I practiced it in my head how I was going to say it. So I stood up and I said, "Hi, my name's Fabian, and I came from Orange Elementary." And the teacher lost her mind and she kicked me out of class, called me a clown, told me to sit down or whatever it was. And she was like, "Boy, there's no such thing as no Orange Elementary." And the whole thing was, it was just a total innocent mistake. And in my mind, I would hear my mom say naranja. Naranja is orange in English. So I just said, well, if my mom says naranja, now I'm speaking English, I went to Orange Elementary. I never really read the sign, right? I was in kindergarten.
Right.
So yeah, those were like those moments that you don't realize what's going on until like way later, right? And you're like, oh, she did not get it.
Yeah. No. That's funny. I remember thinking when I was in the 4th grade, maybe 3rd grade. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it was 2nd grade. I don't remember what grade it was, but I remember my teacher said, "Who can spell the word they?" And I, being enthusiastic, I raised my hand and I said, I can. And she pointed to me and said, TJ, how do you spell the word they? And I said, THAY, right? Because I'm thinking that's how it sounds. So that must be how it's spelled. And I remember I wrote this in one of my books, that suddenly she said, and it seemed like a loud, low voice, she said, nope, you're wrong. And I remember all the kids in the class laughed at me. And from that point until I was probably a sophomore in high school, I didn't speak up at all. I was, yeah, anyway.
Yes, we all have all these childhood traumas.
No, we do. But then you end up, I think weave throughout your book, you have these principles that your parents taught you, like hard work. You skirted over it just now by saying you when you first moved here, you were in a mobile home. Your dad saved his money is all you said there, but actually he paid off that mobile home.
Yes.
And then he ended up going to this new home in a little bit higher level neighborhood. And he ended up paying off that home. And you make the point in the book, and I think it's a good reminder for everybody. And maybe it's a principle that your parents had to learn the hard way, but I think it's a true principle, and it's about saving money. And your dad worked in a factory or some sort of
No, he had a blue collar job.
Blue collar job.
My grandfather worked at a factory.
Okay, so blue collar job, and on that income, he was able to pay off originally the mobile home and eventually the second home and so forth. And I think you make the point in the book that it wasn't as much about how much you make, but it's what you do with your money, right? And it's saving your money and being smart with the way you use your money and so forth. Any thoughts around that could be useful to the listeners listening to this podcast?
Yeah, look, I think it's my father was very clear that in order to make it in America, you have to pay off your mortgage. If you don't, you just basically will never have disposable income. Now, with that being said, I would say that since I wrote this book, it has become nearly impossible to pay off your mortgage or even
oh, geez.
Right? So it's just mind-boggling what has happened and transpired, since I wrote the book. But it's still the same, right? I still believe that if you pay off your mortgage, you're free. I mean, look, I happen to follow in the same footsteps as my grandfather and my father, and then I paid off my mortgage. My brother paid off his mortgage. And you just don't, what people do is when you can pay off your mortgage, you just get you kind of get the biggest house you can get that you can't pay for. And then you wind up paying for it forever.
Right.
So the idea is, no, you got to pick a house and then you just pay that one off. And then from there, you decide what you do. But that was the key ingredient for them to build wealth and have a retirement nest egg. It was just not having that forever mortgage payment. So while people pay, 3 times, 4 times, whatever the house is, the original price was, they paid for it once.
Yeah.
With maybe some little interest, right?
It was right.
So I want to be fair. I don't know if my kids today can do the same thing, at least not in Florida with all the wealth moving down here. But I still believe that is a key ingredient. Everybody should figure out how to do it.
Okay, so your kids, what's the age of them? 14, 13, 14?
Are 17 and 14 today.
17 and 14. My 2 oldest boys, and you have the 2 boys. I have 4 kids, and my oldest is 26 now. He owns a home, but my second son, who graduated with an accounting degree from the business school at BYU, look, he's at a time when he's ready to look at buying a house and so forth. And it's exceptionally harder with the interest rates and everything else going on and the inflation right now as we're doing this interview for him to actually even consider buying a home. Maybe circumstances made it a little bit easier given the time that we grew up. We were able to do some of that. Any thoughts around where we're at today?
I will also say this, and look, I'm a product of seeing both worlds. And there is a key difference today. We are used to capitalism at its finest, and we have the nicest things on earth that we've ever had, right? Apple didn't exist when my parents were around, so people weren't buying an iPhone every year.
Yeah, right.
But we are in such a consumption-driven economy that you have to have all these things, and you have to have all these nice things, and you have to have a nice car, and you have to, and you have to, and you have to. The truth is that we're all really making a lot more money than they were making. The difference is that they lived like immigrants. Today, everybody wants to live like a billionaire. So I want to be fair. Yes, things are more expensive, but everybody's also making a lot more money. My dad was making $3.50 an hour. Now you're making $85,000 and you can't make ends meet. But you're also spending like you're making $200,000 a year, right? So there's something to be said about the focus and the mentality of, look, I'm an immigrant and I got to do these things. Now, I would say that social media, this is not in my book, but I would say that social media has unfortunately created this alternative universe of what makes us feel good and the things that we need in order to make us who we are. The interesting thing about Cubans is that everybody that was someone or had those things lost it all. So when people reunited in Miami, the guy who was a multimillionaire is now cleaning the floors of somebody else's business.
You're saying the person who lived in Cuba, who was a millionaire.
Now they're in Miami doing a blue collar job, right? So all of a sudden everybody's equal. So the weird and interesting thing about that generation of Cubans is that their self-worth was not driven by things that you can buy. It was driven by what no other man or government could take away, which was yourself, your moral character, your work ethic,
integrity, whatever,
your integrity, family, man, woman, good child, good parent, good son. That was it. You can't buy. That you just had to have. So we're in a very interesting world because all these things take away from what the focus is, and before you know it, you lose a decade, 2 decades, and you really have nothing. Okay, so you have 4 pairs of old Gucci shoes, but you just paid how much in interest for the mortgage payment that you didn't finish paying, or did you, when you finally had some equity, did you get an equity line to pay off a credit card?
Yeah, exactly.
My parents did not do that. And
so if we were to channel your parents and that older wisdom, if you will, what would be the advice for all of us listening?
The mission statement: don't have a mortgage. So number 1, you can never be thrown out. You can never be homeless. And no matter what job you have, it's all disposable income. So here's the interesting thing about it. Like, clearly I make good money. But when I paid off my home, what was the first thing I thought about? I'm like, man, if I just lost my job tomorrow, I could work at the grocery store and feed my family in the exact same house and not have anything to worry about. That is freedom.
I remember Brian Tracy one time saying this phrase, and it stuck with me. The author, Brian Tracy, sales trainer, many years. He said, things are soulless. Yep. Things are soulless. Like you just said, the things that nobody can take from you. The government can't take from you. Society can't really take it from you unless you allow them to take it away from you is your integrity, your honesty, the things you value, your family, your friendships, and so forth. And I love that. And I think it's a good reminder for everybody. Be careful what voices you listen to on social media, and remain somewhat humble. Be confident in yourself. Be confident to go achieve your dreams and go after it and be somebody, right? We're all for that. But at the same time, be wise.
Exactly. And look, I would say that my thoughts are extremely bipolar. I mean, I am by no means am I no, I wasn't perfect, and I did have credit card debt at some point, and I did, have a big mortgage with a balloon, but then one day I was like, that's it. I have to channel my parents that like I really have to do what they did. I have to focus. I got to work harder. I got to do 3 jobs. I got to get out of this thing, right? So I did. So I've done the bad and the good of it. So I get it. I get the dichotomy of the entire capitalistic machine.
Yes. No, you do. Okay. So you ended up going to college. You went to a community college first, and then you ended up going
I didn't do great in school. So I did 13th and 14th grade. That's what I call it, at a community college. And then from there, I transferred to the University of Miami.
And you say here, as with most things in life, however, my time at the University of Miami wasn't without struggle. In many ways, the traditional school environment was very difficult for me. I had trouble concentrating, and reading long books was unbearable, especially in subjects that didn't interest me. I was concerned that I might have a learning disability, so I made an appointment to be tested for ADHD. When I arrived at the testing facility for my appointment, I asked what would happen if the test came back positive. The examiner explained to me that the school would contact my professors and inform them that I would qualify for extra time for tests and assignments to compensate for my disability. I instantly felt nauseous and told the examiner I would not be going forward with the testing. I apologized, quickly thanked them, and left. I felt as if I had been punched in the gut. I cried as I rushed back to my dorm. I thought of my family and all the sacrifices, hurt, and obstacles they had to overcome over the years. I felt like getting an accommodation when my family had received none would make me a fraud. I didn't want to be the only one in my family to receive any special treatment. I read that in the book, and it floored me, what I sensed from that. And I want you to balance it out here in the interview, but what I felt from that was a certain respect to honor your upbringing, to honor your parents, and a certain humbleness not to take advantage of a system. And if it meant you had to do it the hard way, you would do it the hard way. That was part of your makeup somehow. Any thoughts about that? Why you made that decision, and would you do it again today?
Oh, I would definitely do it exactly the same today. In fact, I'm doing my MBA in Oxford, and I won't even ask for an extension when everybody just says, "I'll give me an extra week to turn in." You're allowed to do it yourself. I just don't. I think even today, I still think about that. It's weird. Look, I think that a lot of people have that, and everybody should take advantage of it if indeed you have a learning disability. I just remember that day when they said that. I just thought of my dad, and that nobody ever gave him a break, and everything he had to do was, I don't want to say the hard way, but like the right way with no accommodation.
Yeah.
So then I felt like, because I could speak English and I read a couple things here and there, and I noticed that there was a testing center over there, and I was a little bit more switched on to what was going on in the school. I could have sort of, I don't want to say scathed, but I could have done the test, and then I would have gotten something that everyone else didn't get. And I thought I just couldn't do it. I would rather take a B minus or a C plus because I ran out of time and I left 5 questions unanswered than to have all the time in the world that my classmates didn't get. And then I got a better grade because of it.
And I think that story sets up the second half of the book. But I'll just say this, your mom, looking back, you say, I learned several invaluable lessons from that painful, heart-wrenching experience. First, I learned exactly how strong I am. When faced with overwhelming trials, it's easy to give up or try to find an easy way out. But maintaining my integrity was massive motivation for me, and I was committed to never giving up. Just want to point that out. I love that, right? I think it's a good reminder. Okay, let's shift forward due to the time. And now you get into chapter.
You got to pull me out of that spot because it's really weird to listen to someone else read my story and then I get caught up in it.
Oh, did you have something you wanted to add to it?
No, it's just like you just took me back to that day, you know?
I was determined to do all I could to restore the trust and the confidence my family had placed in me. I realized that I'd have to work harder than ever before to plug the giant financial hole that I had made at the time. This is a separate story, but maybe if I haven't lost any money, I wouldn't have worked so hard. But attaching the monetary figure to my failure motivated me to come back stronger than ever. This is early on. I also vowed to never put myself in a similar situation again. I
Yes,
love it.
When I had failed in some businesses pretty badly.
Yeah, and that was referring to a couple business ventures you had gone on. But then you get into some interesting chapters like Dear America. It's like a page and a half. But this is what you say in it, and I think it's good for people to hear this. You said, my parents had a saying like they would tell my brother and me growing up. Quote, no one knows what they have until they lose it. There is a great truth in that statement, especially when considering that all that America has to offer, we are sitting at the brink of a precipice. There are those who want to fundamentally change America from the Constitution to the way we live and the choices we are allowed to make on an individual level. On the other hand, there are those of us who are fighting to preserve the timeless principles of the Constitution. We want to affirm that this country still offers the best hope for freedom and personal prosperity. However, that can only be achieved by keeping the promise of America alive. In recent years, a powerful few have not only embraced but are actively promoting socialism, is what you say. And so in this chapter, you separate, your parents came from a world that changed into socialism, essentially, right? Communism, socialism. And then you come to America where opportunity, the sky's the limit if you're willing to work hard, right? And we've both experienced that in our own individual lives. What were you trying to say in Dear America? What was sort of the essence there?
Well, it's interesting to do this interview again after a couple of years since I wrote that, because it's actually gotten worse. And the push for socialism and those ideals is just more
aggressive, pronounced.
It's aggressive, it's in your face. I would say that they used to hide it and sneak it in, and now they just yell it and tell you what it is. And I think it's extremely concerning when people, I would just say this, everybody has a perspective of a certain president that maybe they didn't like or a certain administration that they didn't like. And I don't care if you're right or left. There's somebody that you're going to loathe. Why would you give so much power to an entity that you are likely going to loathe at some point, whether it's with your guy or gal or someone else's guy or gal. I think that is the scary part that people don't realize. Anyone that thinks that government is going to do it better is just being a fool. Or we got to keep the choice. I think the capitalistic model works. If you're mad at Jeff Bezos, don't buy from Amazon. But if your only option is the government, now you're in trouble because you can't get rid of them. And I think there's no C, it's A or B. And then everyone will tell you, well, it's because it's never been done right. Well, if it's never been done right, I'm not willing to gamble at being done right. Because once it's done, it can't be unwound. And the dragon is going to eat itself. And you could see it in different aspects of government. I don't care what it is. You could look at COVID. It started with a little, we need 2 weeks, and look at how massive it got and how in certain states the government was all over you. Like people were like prisoners and freedom, and if you yell, they I mean it really did show you.
Even citizens turned on citizens, right? It was crazy.
And so imagine if that was just a quick snippet, imagine if they controlled even more. So for me, I have this, it's in the back of my mind. I know what we escaped, and I know what it smells, looks, and feels like. I could feel it in my bones. Like some people can say, hey, I think it's, I got arthritis, it's going to probably rain in 2 hours. That's how I feel about this. And we're very, very close. And I'm just saying, don't go to single option, or we're doomed. I don't care what it is. It could be healthcare, it could be schooling, it could be any of that. You're doomed. You could even, school is a perfect example. There used to only be public schools and rich schools. There are people that are against charter schools. I'm like, why? Let me choose. If I don't like the charter school, I don't go. If I don't go, they don't get paid. How's that wrong? If I like it, why do you have to like it?
Right.
Right. But
it's that individuality versus collectivism.
Options.
Right?
Options.
Yeah.
You gotta have the option, because when there's options, everybody's product or service gets better. When there's no option, it can only get worse.
Right. Well said.
So, yeah, I was very concerned then. I am like extremely concerned now.
Yeah, a lot has changed in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, just the overreach. Like, can we pull that back a little bit or a lot, right? And let the free market work, let people compete, let people achieve more without getting in the way or making too many regulations and rules and so forth. Let's go, let's work. I mean, I think the American people, I think people worldwide, you give them the freedom to act and to get to work and work hard, and they can live their dreams and they can go after their own passions. I tell you what, we can achieve, as human beings, we can achieve some great things.
Absolutely.
Get out of the way.
And look, I also think that people do the right thing when you have options. I think when you don't have options, everybody starts to do the wrong thing.
That's good.
And that's dangerous. And then everything that you hated, or like the buzz terms like, oh, because the elites get all this stuff, all you're going to do is switch one bag of elites for another. The difference is that the elites that build something are giving us value because we're buying what they're building.
Yeah, that's right.
The elites that are political elites, they're not providing any value. Those are the ones that are really stealing from you because they're taking your spot for their friends. That's the reality of it.
And in the coming months, it'll probably get even more crazy. We'll see things we never thought were possible, I think. Right. So,
yeah.
My mom, quote, my mom was beautiful, kind, and compassionate. She treated my brother and I like precious gifts, and I trusted her completely. I knew instinctively that she wanted the very best for me, and she would do all she could to help me grow and develop into a good man. This chapter is titled Choose Your Circle. I think your parents would say, tell me who you spend your time with, or someone once said, it's under the title, tell me who you spend your time with, and I'll tell you who you are. Any thoughts there?
That was my mom's constant saying when we would get back from school. She'd always be like, so tell me who you hung out with so I can tell you who you are. It was about choosing the right circle and the right crowd. If you hang out with people that get in trouble all the time, you're A, guilty by association, and B, that becomes normalized. And before you know it, you're in trouble with them. But if you hang out with people that are studying, doing their work, getting good grades, then that becomes your norm. And then that's what you want to do as well, because that's what feels normal.
And I think that's a great reminder. And I think it also, you could take it one step further into the social media, right? Just that, what voices are you listening to?
Absolutely.
Right? Because your sphere of influence could be simply on the platforms on your phone. You may not have any physical friends around you, but you have these friends here that start to shape your belief systems and so forth. And then you get this kind of victim view of the world, of the future, instead of say, I'm in charge of my destiny. I'm going to go achieve something. And we got to help this, I think, this younger generation believe in themselves again, and to defy some of the beliefs that are being thrown out there. Take advantage of the freedoms that we have, right? Your parents know that very easily from where they came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Choose your circle. Okay, next one. You have a we just got a couple more here, but you have a chapter on privilege. This is what you say in the beginning of the chapter. You say,
some emails.
You say, the word privilege was often used by my family when I was young. For my family, privilege was an inclusive concept. It could be achieved by anyone who was willing to work for it.
Yeah.
So let me just clarify this. So your family didn't have a lot of means, especially when they first got here, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't.
No, they had nothing.
But they felt they were privileged. Am I hearing that right?
Yes. We had the privilege of having a good family, a good head on your shoulder, good work ethic, freedom to not be persecuted, to buy whatever you wanted for dinner. If you wanted more, you could take a second job and do that other thing you wanted to do, or buy that other thing you wanted to buy. That was a privilege they thought of. And the other thing they would do is, within the Cuban community, they would show us what privilege looked like, but they wouldn't do it across races or ethnicities. They wouldn't say, oh, whites have this privilege, or if you're, a typical Southern Californian, blue-eyed American blonde, you get all these things. That's not the way they would look at it. They would say, this is a Cuban spectrum. These people did all these things, and they're bearing the fruit of all these things. They went to school, they studied, they got a great job, they started their business, they're doing well. These Cubans over here got into drugs, did whatever it is that they were doing, they did not wind up well. So within the spectrum of our own community, we would analyze what privilege was. And what they taught me was that every single Cuban had the same privilege, in the sense that they went to the same public schools, they lived in the same neighborhood, they had the same teachers, yet everybody had a different outcome. So the privilege is in what everybody's getting. The outcome is what you did with it. But today, we're just taking that and we're distorting it, and we're making innocent people guilty for something they didn't even know of. And it just drives me crazy, because when someone says, oh, these white people have all this privilege, I'm thinking to myself, there are more people in like trailer parks. Trust me, I know, I lived in one. Than like there are more whites on welfare than, it's just. So that's sort of where that, for me, I'm glad, because here's what's even scarier. If you went to me when I was in second grade in Orange Elementary and you said to me, hey, doesn't matter what you do, all these other people over here, they're going to get, well, you never have a shot to get. Why try? I would have never gone to college. I would have never gone to UM. I would have never played an instrument. And I could promise you that I would not be at Oxford today. And all it would take is one of these terrible people to tell a child, no matter what you do, your friend John Doe over here is going to get all the opportunities that you're never going to get. Yet the irony is that the reality is the other way around. The Latino and the Hispanic and they're the ones taking slots when they don't have the grades and they don't have the SAT scores and they don't have the this and they don't have that, right? So it's everything's backwards.
Yeah.
And I just think it's wrong. And I think we need to be careful. And I don't think that I don't think there's anything wrong pointing out, oh, in the boardrooms, there's too many males and not women. That's fine. But we don't have to find a boogeyman or woman. It just is what it is. What do we have to do to change it? There were not many Hispanics that were in leadership positions at one point in time. That has changed. And my parents pointed it out. When Coca-Cola had their first Cuban CEO, that was a big deal for us. The first time I went out into an airfield 17 years ago, there was not one Hispanic CEO of an airline.
And you are one.
I looked around and I was like, oh, I could change this. Nobody stopped me. I just looked around and said, well, I would like to be that guy.
So I'll go do whatever it has to do to make that a reality.
No one tried to stop me because I was Cuban. Were there people that don't like Cubans? Probably, but they didn't get in my way. But you have to have and provide value.
Yes.
You have to give more than what you're willing to get.
That's it.
And I think today people want a lot that they're not willing to put their time in for.
That's right.
Just because someone else has it. But you see, no one really knows what that individual did or what they sacrificed or what they didn't sacrifice, right?
That's right.
Like, is it luck? I think there's no such thing. I think it's luck meets preparation. But nobody wants to look behind what it took to be prepared.
Correct.
Being at the right place at the right time. Maybe not being home. Maybe not doing dinners with your family every day. There were years that I would come home and my kids were already sleeping. I'd whisper, I love you in their ear and give them a kiss.
Yep.
I hope they heard me.
I'm sure they did.
But it's...
Yeah, you don't know. That 10,000 hour rule or whatever, you don't see what led up to that moment when the person did get the opportunity or showed up and was
everybody sees what you bought. Nobody sees what you gave up.
Oh, that's good. Okay, next subject. That's really good. The next subject is cancel culture. You say America is a nation built on Judeo-Christian values. We were taught and understand that people often fall short of the ideal in many ways. But we believe in forgiveness, especially when the repentance offered is real and sincere.
These values kept us moving in the right direction for generations.
Until now. Any thoughts about cancel culture?
Yeah, this is a huge topic nowadays. Now, I will say the same way that I think things have gotten worse, I will say in this category, it's starting to soften up and gotten a little bit better. I think people are realizing that you can start canceling other people, but at some point you're going to get canceled yourself. And it's just, if you create this monster, it's going to come right back
Which
to buy.
shouldn't surprise anybody, because like attracts like, right? It's a law of the universe. Karma is a real thing.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the people that are espousing this nonsense aren't squeaky clean and perfect individuals, right? So it's only a matter of time before it just boomerangs right back and hits them in the face. Like my mom used to say, don't spit up because it lands right in between you.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. So it's yeah, I think it's wrong. I think times change. I think all of us do and say deplorable things at some point in our lives. There's, no, I know there's a ton of things I've said that have probably been horrible. My excuse and the story I'm going to tell myself is that I did it for comedic purposes. And, comedians do like to push the edges in every category. And I think we all partake in that at some point. Um, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't, but you just can't go back and someone says something stupid. You just have to say, hey, I acknowledge that what I said was dumb. I should have not said it, or that comment was completely inappropriate and uncalled for. And I'm sorry, and that's it, and we move on. That's just the way this works. Like we hurt our spouses without even wanting to. Like it's just
Yeah.
sort of being human is sticking our what happened to foot and mouth? I mean, that's been around forever.
Right. Right. And
And then what's bad about it is that some people get a pass and other people don't get a pass. And then it just doesn't work that way. I think if you're remorseful, everybody should get a pass. That is the way it's supposed to work. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me. You're forgiven, and we move on. That's just nice. And
I can't
it
help but think
feels
about,
good to make a mistake, say, I made the mistake. I
I'm
want to learn and grow
sorry.
from this. I'm sorry and I want to do better. And when the other person says, I hear you, apology accepted, let's move on, both people get a happy thing, right?
It's
But if
true.
you do this, what you did was wrong, you're canceled. I don't want you to have a job. I want you to lose your job. I don't want you to feed your family. I don't like, let's just play this out.
Yeah.
So you lose your job, you can't feed your family. What do you think that person's probably going to do?
Yeah.
Should I start stealing, robbing, feed my family? I mean, it's complete craziness. Complete craziness.
It makes me think of a story in the Bible when the adulterer came to Jesus Christ. They wanted the law said to stone her to death. And Jesus said, those among you that are perfect can cast the first stone. And none of the Sadducees or whatever could do it. It's the same. It's the
It's
principle's
the
been
exact,
around.
it's the exact same thing. And I think what happens is, look, I have my beliefs, you have your beliefs, we share similar beliefs. I'm not here to say everybody should believe this, but there are good things in the Ten Commandments. There are good things in
Yeah,
these
agreed.
set of laws, whether you want to believe in Jesus or God, there are good things that inherently work on this. One brings good karma, the other one does not. One is about love and respect, kindness and compassion. The other one is about being mean, hateful, spiteful, and I hope you die and go to hell. I mean, what? Why? Like, those are the two options. But the interesting thing is that the people that do this cancel culture thing, they're the same ones that are, you know, going around saying love, kindness, and compassion, and at the end they're not even living up to it. I just don't. Again, going back to Cuba, that is exactly what they would do. If they don't like what you
Well,
say, they would
this is
cancel you, throw you out, and then you were it's really just modern communism.
Well, I do, and I think it's a slippery slope. I'll just say this real
100%.
quick. In the corporate environment or organizational environment, right? There's a big push for diversity and inclusion and so forth. And I agree with all that in its pure form. But unfortunately, that's often not applied if they learn that maybe you have a different political bent than them or a different set of religious beliefs than them. And then it suddenly is not very diversity oriented or inclusive and so forth. And so I remember in the old days, when you and I were younger, we're in our 20s, the focus wasn't necessarily diversity and inclusion the way it is today. Back then, it was just kindness and respect. Can we just get back to just be kind and respectful to everybody? I mean, let's come on.
100%. I think what's happened is I'm okay with diversity, equity, and inclusion being accepted. And when you look at an organization that it's there, I don't think that should be the top line. The top line should always be merit. Merit and what you bring to the table. Then we can look at everything else, right? But you don't want your pilot
or your surgeon,
or your surgeon to be picked because of characteristics that had absolutely nothing to do with the skill set of what it is they're about to do, and place the lives of 200-300 people in their hands.
Well, yeah, but this has been attacked for 40 years, the whole idea of meritocracy. And so I get there's an area where maybe we could be softer about it, but I do think that a lot of things should be merit-based. And the surgeon I
think that should be first, right? So if all things are equal, then you go to the next one.
Right.
But you don't give up merit to squeeze in something else.
Yep.
It's just a recipe for disaster.
Yep, that's right.
And I'll tell you, I mean, in a corporate world, what will happen is that the people that do have merit, and they see that they're now bringing in a team without merit, they're out.
They're out.
So if you had a great company with a great team of 100 people, and now you bring in 3 people that lack that one skill, the whole fabric of it starts to go.
You remember that old video after Steve Jobs passed away of Apple Computers, and it was the lost movie or video or interview, the lost interview, I think is what it was called. And he said, here's what I discovered about that early engineering team or that software development team. He says, A players like to play with A players. B players like to play with B players and C players. A players don't want to play with C players. And C players won't feel as comfortable with the A players anyway. Right. So I think you said it early on in the interview, what value do you bring to the enterprise? And I think that's a universal law. What value do you bring to your company? If you bring value and not demand the promotion, but bring value that you're deserving of that promotion because of good behavior or skill level, development, whatever, you're automatically going to be the person that gets those positions and so forth because you've earned it. And here's the beautiful thing. This is what makes human beings different, is that we have choice. We have any human being can listen to this interview and decide, you know what, I want that promotion, or I want to reach that level of that particular role, whatever. No matter where you start, you can set your mind on that goal and then go develop yourself and eventually get there. It just, what you're saying is, maybe it shouldn't just be handed to a certain group of people or segment of the population without the skill sets there to justify.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that you don't adjust it at the end. You adjust it at the beginning. So you teach people, hey, for that job, this is the merit you got to have. These are the skills you have to have. This is a competency you have to have. This is a level of astuteness you need to have, and excellence and professionalism. This is the standard. Not, well, in order for us to fix it here, we're going to let go of all these standards. We're going to let go of all these things, and then we're just going to shove. Because now you took a CD player, and the A players are going to be like, this doesn't represent me. I'm out. Or let's create a new company where we can have just A players, and we'll just run it on our own.
Yeah, which
happens.
Can happen
and does happen. So again, I'm all for fixing it, but there's a right place to fix it. It's really at the beginning. So if you don't like what the result looks like, you don't fix it here. You go back to the root cause, and that's where you work it.
That's it. Okay, last thought, question, chapter that I think was really good. Self-confidence, no time for victimhood. Self-confidence is the only remedy for insecurity, doubt, and perceived oppression. It seems that recently our nation has gone from celebrating the success of others to blaming others for the fact that not everyone experiences equal amounts of success or any success at all. As an immigrant whose family came here with literally nothing more than a desire to be free, I find this attitude to be appalling and pathetic. Did your parents, when they landed in Miami, did they have any money at all?
No, not $1. Not $1. And we never looked at anybody else and said, oh, well, look at everything they have. We were like, they did certain things to achieve that. Look, some achieved things not doing the right thing. But we were also aware of what that looked like and made a conscious decision that we're going to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, you get to have certain things. And my parents were also very aware that they may only achieve X amount based on their age, the fact that they didn't dominate the language, the fact that they were immigrants, and the fact that time was just running out. But what they did is make sure that although their generation was severely set back, that they quickly reversed course so my generation can be better off than they were at their best time.
Very good point. What I see sometimes is that pendulum swings to make it better for the next generation, that there's no discipline, it's give them whatever they want, there's no barriers, there's no guardrails, go be free. And
but then I would say you did what the opposite of what my father says. I overheard him once tell someone else what a parent's job was. A parent's job is to not raise children for yourself. Your job is to raise children for society. And you don't get to grade that. Society does. So society looks at your kids, or they look at you and they say, you know, that is a great productive member of society. Their parents did a great job. They should be really, really proud of who that child became. That's an A+ report card. But if you raise your child to be a petulant baby their entire lives, or you give them everything that they don't deserve, or you call them princess all the time, and then they go out in the real world, and the world tells them, you're not a princess. You're not getting that. I'm not giving you that. You didn't earn that. Good luck with that. That's why so many people are on antidepressants. I think all those people can probably blame their parents. And I mean that nicely. I will also say that if that is the case, every new generation should be better than the last. And in many cases, the new generation is a gallon and their parents were only a pint. So you have to be cognizant of that and say, look, you know, maybe in this family, that mom and that dad gave all they had and it wasn't much.
Right.
But if you really look at the potential of the next generation, it's always more. In the starting line, it's always more
than the previous
one. My kid's potential is way more than what mine could have ever been. So I have this mindset of, look, there's zero tolerance for you guys to just not be good people and like productive members of society. Like, you don't have to be a billionaire, but you know, you have to do the right thing, and you have to have a certain level of success, because your brain is better than mine. If I'm a gallon, you're a 5-gallon jug if I'm only a gallon. But I think some people get stuck, and then they're like, well, I'm a gallon. I'm not a gallon, although they always are, and they're just going to pour, a little bit in there, and then that's all they're going to achieve, right?
I just saw someone today. I was taking my 13-year-old daughter, to physical therapy. She's a big soccer player, and she's working on her core and doing some extracurricular training and so forth. And I saw a young man that I knew was a teenager a few years back, and now he's a young adult and he's going to college, but he's home for the summer. and we were talking about his future, and I just reminded him, remember, go be somebody, go achieve something great, not because it's going to be handed to you, but because you're going to go grab it. You're going to go develop yourself in such a way that energy and those resources and those opportunities are going to flow towards you because you deserve it, not because you arbitrarily deserve it because it was handed to you. You deserve it because you paid the price.
Yeah. Could you imagine a world where we filled our kids' brains with positive thoughts that were just life-changing? It's, a lot of adults go to hear all these motivational speakers, and, you're trying to become better, and you do it in your 30s and your 40s and whatever. But imagine if we just really did that since they're born, regardless of what your socioeconomic status is, regardless of where you came from, regardless of who your parents are, what they did right or what they've been doing wrong, that they can just hear that over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, imagine what that would do.
Outcome would be completely different. And again, going back to what I'm very concerned about, is that that's not the messaging we're telling our kids.
Well, you are. I am. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm saying
generally.
But I don't want to think. I always think of the me in that public school, and that's what I find to be the norm. My kids are not the norm. They've never stepped foot in a public school. They go to a all Christian Lutheran school where there's values and it's just different. That's not reality.
But hopefully you as a parent, you and Jennifer are teaching some of those core principles and giving them expectations and opportunities to grow and figure that.
Yes, but I'm very aware that what they're getting, I want everybody else to get.
Oh, sure.
And what I want is for the best parents to be the ones controlling government and school and what they're being taught and how they're being taught. And I just don't think that's happening today. And it makes me really angry and upset. Because I don't think it's that hard to give your kids good messaging. And I think all adults should be doing it. And I think that we're just not. And for every day that passes, I just think it's getting worse.
Nope, I agree with you. We got to not buy into the victim, as you say, no time for victimhood. Let's not buy into victimhood. Maybe you're struggling, you as a listener, struggling with work or situations or finances or the food bill right now because of inflation is higher than normal and you're trying to make ends meet or whatever, whoever's listening, whatever your circumstances. Don't allow your current discomfort to become the language your children come to accept as a reality. Right? My belief is we want to always speak of striving. We always want to speak of reaching for the ideal, not that every decision is going to turn out great and not every opportunity is going to become a great opportunity, but I'm going to keep trying. And as long as I have that belief, I'm not going to give up, as Tony Robbins would often say when I worked with him. Most people quit after 1 or 2 failures. But when you read any biography of any high achiever, if you will, right? They failed multiple times. The difference was they just kept getting up. I mean, you think of Sylvester Stallone. He just kept getting back up. He didn't have any special talents or whatever. He just fought through it until he landed those few opportunities that gave him more opportunities, right? And so
I got it wrong. I was going to not listen to my dad. I was doing exactly what I just said here not to do. I was caught up in the capitalistic machine, and I was over leveraged, and I thought it was all going to keep going up. And then during the housing market crisis, it all came crashing down. But that was a wake-up call. That was like, okay, now I have a choice. I can go back and do it exactly how I did it. That got me here. Or I'm going to try it my dad's way.
That's good. Well,
we have 2 examples. One worked out really well with a fraction of what I make.
Yep.
And here with a lot more. I remember he would look at me and say, I don't understand. Like you make 40 times what I what I have, and you don't even have, a slither of a nail of the security that I ever had. He was right.
Okay, so what's going to be our lasting thought here today on that process? Seek wisdom, not just knowledge, right? Learn from some of the leaders, including your parents, right? The leaders of the past, that maybe they've learned a few things.
What's your mission statement?
What's your mission statement?
No to socialism. Don't count on government.
Yep, yeah.
Make sure you give yourself, by how you vote, every option you could possibly give yourself. And don't hand over any industry or anything to one governing entity. Ever. Because even if you love them today, in 4 years or 8 years or 12 years or 16 years, you're going to get somebody you hate. And they're going to make your life horrible. So prepare for that now. Keep government small.
Yes.
Run by the people,
Right.
based on free choice and will. And then if you get a bad person, they're not really controlling much because you didn't give them so much to control.
Different branches of government.
Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yes.
And I think what we do in America is that, we live this, we got to hope for the best.
Yes, we do.
And we're not prepared for the worst.
Love it. Your book, I think everybody should get a copy of it. It's called Remade in America by Fabian Bello. You can get it wherever books are sold. Is there anything else you want to add to that, where they can get it or anything? Website, social media, anything, Fabian?
No, I think whatever the regular channels are for Kindles and audiobooks and Amazon or whatever it is.
It's all out there. You even have an audio book of it, and you did the audio reading of it, which is cool. Get to hear your beautiful voice. Anyway, listen, Fabian, you're a good guy, a good friend. I feel privileged to have known you these past years. I think you have an amazing story here. I love that you honor your parents the way you do, and that history and that Cuban spirit. And I hope
I appreciate it. Thank you, team.
No, for real. You're a good guy, and I'm glad we're friends. So,
and look, I just want to add one more thing. The only reason why I'm doing this is because I don't think my kids can. And the reason why I don't think they can is because they're the ones that are going to be casted in this umbrella of false privilege and all these things based on my and my wife's success. So I just said, if I don't speak up and warn them now, I don't want to be 75 and thinking, oh, I could have said something, I could have, written a book, I could have warned people, like I was the product of whatever this is. So at least my conscience is clear. I know where I came from. I know what it feels like. And like I said earlier, it's going to rain, and I feel it in the bones, and we got to be prepared for it.
Love it. I think you have some wise words you've said today. Thank you, Fabian, for being on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thanks, DJ.
You bet.
Hey there. What'd you think? I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. It's my pleasure to share these insights and distinctions that will lead to more happiness, fulfillment, and achievement in life.
Greatness
so, hey,
within.
if you like the message, if you like the podcast episode, hey, do me a favor. Would you give me a thumbs up? Would you give me a star rating? I'd really appreciate it. Better yet, if you wouldn't mind writing a little review wherever you're listening to this from, that would be really great. I'd appreciate it. All right, now go out there and unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com.